Johnny Carson banned these guests. Truth will shock you. Imagine stepping onto live television, ready to charm millions, only to be erased forever. Johnny Carson wasn't just a host. He was the gatekeeper of fame. One slip, one outburst, one insult, and your career could vanish overnight. Carson didn't yell or rant. He simply closed the door. And when that door closed, Hollywood followed suit. Behind the laughter lived a blacklist so ruthless it could end lifetimes. No warnings, no second chances. Silence was his deadliest weapon, and one moment of misjudgment could turn applause into a permanent exile. Number 1. Shelley Winters, the drink-throwing incident. She was Hollywood royalty. 2 Oscars, a legacy of classics, and a larger-than-life personality. But Shelley Winters' fiery temper and love of alcohol made her unpredictable. Carson tolerated it for years, until 1975. That night, visibly impaired, Winters slurred and spun conversations into chaos. Carson tried gentle nudges, but patience has limit. When he made a lighthearted remark about her weight, a topic she often joked about, she snapped. In a shocking moment, she hurled a full glass of whiskey, ice and all, directly at him. The audience gasped. Carson, drenched but composed, cut to commercial. Behind the scenes, he issued a ban. She was never to return. For Winters, the consequences were brutal. In a Hollywood obsessed with visibility, losing Carson's couch meant a career death sentence. She later admitted, "Johnny had every right never to see me again." One impulsive act, one permanent exile. Her brilliance was undeniable, but that night defined her legacy on late-night television. For Winters, the consequences were brutal. At a time when aging actresses already struggle for visibility, losing The Tonight Show meant losing millions of living room connections. Her mainstream spotlight dimmed, and Winters later admitted she was in a bad place during that period. Reflecting on the infamous night, she called Carson's ban fair. Yet the moment followed her for decades, overshadowing her brilliance. Hollywood is unforgiving, but Carson's silence was harsher still. For Winters, one outburst defined a lifetime of reputation. One impulsive act, one permanent exile.
Tommy Newsom and tell him he had a great personality.
Number 2. Rich Little, the mysterious disappearance. Some bands were explosive. Rich Little's was eerily silent. For more than a decade, the Canadian impressionist was Carson's go-to guest. His uncanny voices of presidents and movie stars delighted audiences, making him a Tonight Show regular, over 30 appearances. Then, without explanation, he simply vanished. No dramatic fallout, no headline-making clash. Producers stopped calling, invitations dried up. Little himself said years later, "I kept waiting for the call, but it never came." The mystery unraveled slowly. Behind the scenes, Carson found him exhausting. Off-camera, Little never dropped the act, constantly performing, doing impressions even in rehearsal. What viewers loathed for 10 minutes, Johnny endured for hours. Worse, Carson noticed recycled material. He prized freshness, and when a guest repeated jokes, he saw it as laziness. Johnny muttered once, "Does he even have his own voice?" That irritation hardened into permanent dismissal. For Little, the fallout wasn't career-ending. He thrived on other shows and tours. But losing Carson's couch was losing the nation's biggest stage. And he never got closure. As he put it, "In this business, you rarely get told why doors close. They just close." In later interviews, Little confessed he would have written entirely new material if he'd known that repetition angered Carson so deeply. But the mystery band taught him a lesson. Success in comedy isn't about perfection, it's about evolution. For Carson, staleness was betrayal. For Little, silence was the cruelest punchline. Sometimes the deadliest ban wasn't a blowout, it was silence.
T-Mobile Arena, had just been built. And so they asked...
Number 3. Wayne Newton, the backstage threat. Johnny Carson had roasted countless celebrities in his monologues, and most took it in stride. But Wayne Newton, Mr. Las Vegas, wasn't laughing. Carson's jokes about his youthful looks and whispered jabs about his sexuality stung, especially in a conservative era where such rumors could ruin careers. In 1980, Newton decided enough was enough. He stormed into NBC's Burbank studios unannounced, bypassed security, and barged straight into Carson's office. Carson looked up expecting small talk. Instead, Newton issued a threat. "You can joke about my music or my hair, but touch my sexuality again and I'll kick your ass." Carson didn't flinch. He rose slowly, towering over Newton, and said evenly, "Get out of my office before I have you thrown out. No yelling, no theatrics, just ice." The threat had crossed the line Johnny never forgave. Newton was banned permanently. The fallout was devastating. While Newton remained a Vegas draw, his national reach collapsed without Carson's stage. One NBC insider summed it up: "Being banned by Johnny didn't just mean one show, it meant losing America." Carson could forgive jokes gotten wrong. He never forgave intimidation. In his world, threats meant exile. Newton never denied confronting Johnny. He called it worth the price years later. Yet that price was steep. While Vegas adored him, mainstream TV never fully embraced him again. Carson's office showdown became a cautionary tale. Remind hosts of their flaws if you must, but never threaten the man himself.
Said I'm as tall as a shotgun and just as noisy. Would you welcome Truman Capote?
Number 4. Truman Capote, the incoherent disaster. Truman Capote was once America's literary darling, the sharp mind behind In Cold Blood and Breakfast at Tiffany's. But by 1975, his demons were winning. When he walked onto Carson's stage that year, it was clear something was terribly wrong. Capote staggered slightly, his eyes glassy, his words slurred. Carson, ever the professional, tried to save him. He asked short questions, tried to redirect, even turned it toward humor. Nothing worked. Truman rambled, forgot sentences, and drifted into explicit gossip unsuitable for network TV. Finally, Carson cut to commercial, leaned in, and told him, "You're not well tonight. We're gonna cut this short." The scheduled 10-minute slot lasted barely 4. The ban was immediate. Capote never returned. Carson wasn't condemning the man. He was protecting his audience and his show's dignity. For a host who valued professionalism, intoxication on live TV was unforgivable. The consequences were crushing. Authors depended on Carson's couch to sell books. Without it, Capote's last work struggled for attention. A literary giant was left shouting into the void. Carson's standard was simple. You could be eccentric, but you had to be coherent. Fail that, and you were gone. Capote's meltdown revealed Carson's strict code. Eccentricity was acceptable. Incoherence was not. What hurt most was Carson's disappointment, not rage. For a writer who thrived on visibility, losing Carson's couch dimmed his star. The moment symbolized decline. America's brightest literary flame flickered out under the host's cold, steady gaze.
My next guest, you all know, Joan Rivers. She's appearing at the Plaza 4 here in Century City. She'll be there for the rest of the week.
Number 5. Joan Rivers, the protege's betrayal. For Johnny Carson, Joan Rivers wasn't just another comedian. She was family. He personally championed her in an industry hostile to women, making her the first permanent guest host of The Tonight Show. Carson's stamp of approval turned her into a household name. She often said, "Johnny gave me my career." Then came 1986. Fox offered Rivers her own late-night talk show, directly competing with Carson's. The salary was huge, the power unprecedented. But Rivers delayed telling Johnny, terrified of his reaction. She waited too long. He discovered the news not from her lips, but from a Variety headline. To Carson, whose childhood had been scarred by abandonment, that felt like ultimate betrayal. His reaction was icy finality. He declared, "She's dead to me." From that day, her name vanished from his show. Old clips erased. Mentions forbidden. The blacklist extended beyond NBC. Friends withdrew. Invitations evaporated. Rivers' career spiraled into chaos. Even years later, she said losing Carson's friendship hurt more than losing the platform. She never appeared on The Tonight Show again until 2014, long after Carson's death. It wasn't just professional exile. It was personal heartbreak that lasted a lifetime. Betrayal sealed with silence. Even decades later, Rivers choked up when discussing Johnny. She said, "He gave me my career, and I hurt him." Her exile wasn't just a lost job. It was losing a father figure. Success returned, but that wound never closed. Carson's silence became the ghost haunting her every triumph.
That was the most humble, just kind of self-effacing entry.
Number 7. Charles Grodin, The Comedy Clash. Charles Grodin should have been a perfect Carson guest. Sharp, sardonic, intelligent. Instead, his confrontational shtick became one of the oddest Tonight Show bands ever. Grodin's act was to play difficult, mocking Johnny's questions, acting hostile, even accusing him of not caring about guests. The first time, it was edgy fun. The audience loved the tension, but Grodin pushed too far. Over repeat appearances, the line between bit and insult blurred. blurred. Viewers often thought the hostility was real, and Carson, famously sensitive about sincerity, grew uneasy. The breaking point came in 1990. Grodin began mocking Johnny's delivery and implied he only did the show for a paycheck. That jab cut deep. Carson, notorious for emotional distance in real life, bristled at any suggestion his on-air warmth was fake. He forced a smile until commercial, then turned to his producer. "We're done with that. 4 words, end of story." No official ban, no public drama. Grodin was simply never booked again. For Carson, undermining his integrity on his own stage was unforgivable. The lesson was sharp. Clever ribbing entertained him, but questioned his authenticity, and you vanished. Grodin later joked he thought he was doing Andy Kaufman when he antagonized Carson, but Carson never found the act funny once it blurred reality. His band showed how fragile credibility is on live TV. Audiences might laugh, but for Carson, comedy that undermines sincerity was comedy gone too far.
As you're going to find out in the weeks, months, and years ahead, certain things really burn.
Number 8. Morton Downey Jr. Clash of Talk Titans. If Carson was a polished gentleman, Morton Downey Jr. was his opposite. Loud, chain-smoking, combative, a pioneer of shock TV. By 1988, Downey's confrontational show was a cultural phenomenon. Booking him on The Tonight Show was risky, but Carson reluctantly agreed. It went downhill instantly. Instead of sitting politely, Downey played to the crowd, pacing the stage, basking in applause. Carson's face froze into what staff called his Arctic expression. When Johnny's jaw clenched, you knew the guest was on borrowed time. Downey interrupted questions, shouted over Carson, and mocked rival hosts. The implicit jab at Johnny was obvious. They lacked the courage to be real. Carson sat back disengaged, a silent death sentence for any guest. The interview ended early. Backstage, Carson dismissed him coldly. "That's not television, it's a circus act. And this isn't the big top." 4 words, end of story. Downey never returned. His career fizzled soon after. For Carson, Downey wasn't just an annoying guest. He was a symbol of television's descent into confrontation and chaos. Johnny believed talk shows were about wit, not volume. Downey embodied everything he feared the medium would become. Downey's band was visionary. His brash, confrontational style foreshadowed the rise of shock TV and reality-style shouting matches. Carson's rejection wasn't just personal, it was generational. Johnny symbolized civility in an industry shifting toward chaos. By slamming the door on Downey, Carson made a final stand for a vanishing era. Carson rejected him and everything he represented. If these bands shocked you, imagine what's still ahead. Hit subscribe and stay tuned, because the next stories aren't just about careers destroyed, but friendships shattered and reputations erased. Carson's blacklist wasn't random, it was ruthless. Stick around. You don't want to miss who he silenced next. Johnny Carson's bands carried a force few dared challenge. The Tonight Show wasn't just entertainment, it was America's cultural hub. A single booking could make or break careers. So when Carson decided someone was never again, it wasn't a personal grudge, it was a professional death sentence. Agents stopped calling, networks lost interest, and suddenly entire careers went cold. What made it worse was Johnny's silence. He rarely explained why, leaving band guests stranded in uncertainty. That whisper of disapproval carried farther than any public scandal. Carson's blacklist didn't just punish, it erased. Carson wasn't ruthless without reason. If a guest stumbled over words upon a joke, he often invited them back. To him, mistakes proved human, but humiliation, betrayal, intoxication, or intimidation, those weren't errors, they were insults. And insults to Johnny shattered trust. Shelley Winter's whiskey toss, Joan Rivers' defection, Truman Capote's intoxicated rambling each cut deeper than embarrassment. These weren't professional missteps. They felt like violations of the unspoken pact between host and guest. Carson believed his show demanded respect, failed to give it, and you weren't just bad, you were invisible. For him, forgiveness ended where dignity began. Carson's blacklist reshaped careers across Hollywood. Wayne Newton's national exposure dwindled. Truman Capote's books sold fewer copies. Joan Rivers lost friends, bookings, and years of momentum. Even stars who thrived elsewhere carried the scar of Johnny's rejection. His bands revealed the real power of late-night TV. It wasn't laughter, but access. To millions of Americans, Carson's couch defined relevance. Without it, stars vanished from the mainstream conversation. The impact extended far beyond his stage, echoing through studios, agents, and audiences. Carson's grudges became Hollywood's quiet law. Cross the king of late night, and you forfeited the crown. Behind the icy bands lived a man shaped by insecurity and loss. Carson's childhood was marked by abandonment and emotional distance. Betrayal, like Joan Rivers' defection, cut deeper than business. It reopened old wounds. Being mocked, humiliated, or disrespected touched his most sensitive nerves. His bands weren't random explosions of ego. They were defenses. Protecting his dignity meant protecting his carefully built persona. Affable host America adored. Each exile revealed not just the guest's offense, but Johnny's fragile boundaries. His blacklist, in truth, told the story of a man balancing charm with fear, forever guarding himself behind silence. Imagine having Carson's power for one night. Who would you ban from your living room forever? A celebrity you annoy, a singer you can't stand, or maybe a comedian who never lands the joke? Drop your choice below, and let's see whose blacklist would rival Johnny's. Carson ruled late night with charm, but his silence cut deeper than words. These bans weren't random. They defined careers, friendships, and reputations. His blacklist proved one truth. In Hollywood, power isn't loud. It's quiet, cold, and absolute. Cross Johnny once, and you never crossed his stage again. Thanks for watching. If Carson's blacklist stunned you, imagine the feuds still untold. Subscribe now and join us next time as we uncover more scandals, betrayals, and secrets hidden in Hollywood's golden shadows.